The little study we have for this evening is based on Zephaniah 2:3, and the title of this is The Perfect Fruit. And we think of finding the perfect fruit sometimes, and there's an interesting phrase in the Spirit of Prophecy that talks about the perfect fruit, and so I thought that was an interesting thought. Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 3 tells us, "Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger." Earth, and we know that we're living in the closing scenes of Earth's history. And I want to backtrack a little bit in Zephaniah. It says in chapter 2, it says, "Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired. Before the decree bring forth, before the day pass as the chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you. Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger." We often think about the fact that we need to seek righteousness, yet it says right here that we need to seek meekness also. And in Christ's Object Lessons, we read that through conflict, the spiritual life is strengthened. Trials well borne will develop steadfastness of character and precious spiritual graces. The perfect fruit of faith, meekness, and love often matures best amid storm clouds and darkness. We were thinking of that fruit that was on the tree a minute ago, and sometimes it's so bad when fruit decays before it has a chance to ripen properly, or it falls before it ripens properly, or they pick it too soon and then it ripens in the house instead of on the tree, and then sometimes it doesn't ripen at all. But the perfect fruit of faith, meekness, and love often matures best amid storm clouds and darkness. Sometimes our most difficult times are the very thing that brings the best fruit. I think of a wonderful example of meekness is found in John chapter 18, in the experience of Jesus in his difficult time, in his time on earth. When Jesus had spoken these words, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, that's referring to John chapter 17, and he had just finished praying for unity among his people and that we would reflect Christ and be one as he and his Father are one. And then it goes on to verse 8, chapter 18. It says, "When Jesus had spoken these words," after John 17, "he went forth with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where was a garden, into the which he entered and his disciples. And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus oft times resorted thither with his disciples." So Judas knew this place. Was he going to use it for good purposes, the fact that he knew where Jesus often went to be in a quiet place? Unfortunately not. We read that Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, and Jesus oft times resorted thither with his disciples. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, "Whom seek ye?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus saith unto them, "I am he." And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. As soon as he had said that unto them, "I am he," they went backward and fell to the ground. Then asked he them again, "Whom seek ye?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I have told you that I am he. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spake, of that which thou gavest me have I lost none." Let's pause for a minute now and think of how merciful God is, how merciful Jesus is. He knew they were coming after him, but he said, let them go. let them go their way. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then Jesus said unto Peter, Put up thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it? So we're reading just from John, but I want to pause just for a minute to look at Mark. Right in this point, Mark mentions it and says, And Jesus answered and said unto them, Are ye come out as against a thief, with swords and with staves to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you took me not. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. And they all forsook him and fled. Remember, he said, Let these go their way. So they went their way. They all forsook him and fled. Can you imagine being abandoned at such a moment as this? Now going back to John. Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him and led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. So Peter got an entrance through the other disciple, so he could see what was going on. Then saith the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Art not thou also one of this man's disciples? He saith, I am not. And the servants and officers stood there, who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold. And they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort. And in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me, what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I've said. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smitest thou me? Now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas the high priest, and Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. They said therefore unto him, Art now thou also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, saith, Did I not see thee in the garden with him? Peter denied again, and immediately the cock crew. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas into the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. Then said Peter and Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. So what are they saying here? Let's pause a minute here. They're basically saying, if he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up. In other words, respect our authority. Trust us to be the fact checkers. We've got this all figured out. You just do what we say. They weren't very humble, were they? Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews? Jesus answered him, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Well, let's look at this now for a minute. How often somebody may say something, and you know they didn't come up with it themselves. Somebody else told them that. And so this is something we have to watch out for, because this is the kind of spirit that was entering into this scene at this moment. Pilate says, What have you done? He couldn't see it. He was just going by what they said, the fact checkers. Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. Pilate saith unto him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and saith unto them, I find no fault in him at all. So Jesus was trying to tell him that the kingdom of which Christ was a king is not of this world. But for that reason, it's why the followers of Jesus don't fight. But then all that Pilate heard was this king word, and then he said, he's crowding in on my territory here. I don't like it. But at the same time, he could see. We read in other places that he could see through. It says in the Bible, he knew that it was for envy they delivered him. He saw it was just the jealousy of these people that was trying to condemn this innocent man. So he came up with this solution instead of dealing with the actual problem. He says, But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will ye therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews? Then cried they all again, saying, Not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. So, do we always make the right choice on these things? Human nature doesn't seem to make the best choice. Some of these who had actually known Jesus as the compassionate healer were about to start yelling, crucify him, just because everybody else was doing it. Pilate chose, even though Pilate could see something was not quite right here, he chose the political route to try to protect his position, but he was not blessed. He soon lost both his peace and his position. Psalm 75, verse 5-7, it says, Lift not up your horn on high, speak not with a stiff neck, for promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. But God is the judge. He putteth down one and setteth up another. I'm thinking of this election that's going on right now, and how ultimately everything's in God's hands. Everything's in God's hands. And we just have to pray, Thy will be done, Lord, whatever the thing is, because we don't get involved in these things. And Daniel 2:44 reminds us that there are all these kingdoms. We look at all the kingdoms that are outlined in history, the empires of the world, the great empires of the world, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And then we see finally the final kingdom that is not with man as a ruler. In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So with that perspective in mind, we're reminded of another psalm, Psalm 37. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. So shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. Rest in the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger, and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. For evildoers shall be cut off. But those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be. Yea, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. So we're told not to fret when we see things that aren't fair, when we see things that are not right, we see things that we don't have control over. Sometimes there are things we can adjust. Sometimes we can work to try to make things a little bit more the way God would have them. But sometimes it's beyond our control, beyond prayer, except for prayer, in other words. And I always think of this idea of meekness because Jesus, when on the Sermon on the Mount, was actually quoting Psalm 37 when he said, the meek shall inherit the earth. Now, what is meekness? We read in the testimonies that meekness is a precious grace, willing to suffer silently, willing to endure trials. Meekness is patient and labors to be happy under all circumstances. Meekness is always thankful and makes its own songs of happiness, making melody in the heart to God. Meekness will suffer disappointment and wrong and will not retaliate. You know, I think of this little picture that was supposed to be a depiction of meekness in the mind of one designer. And I think in this way, both the mother and the cub are being meek at this particular moment. And they're lions, you know. But there is a far greater example for us. And that's why we sang that song at the beginning, the ultimate meekness personified in the coming of the God of heaven as a little baby. And the ultimate glory will be personified as he comes again.